unto thee, save me, and I shall keep thy testimonies. I prevented the dawning of the morning. I cried, I hoped in thy word. Mine eyes prevent.
Good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. My name is Paul Strangini. I am 20 minutes out of bed. It's not my chosen timing. I had to work late last night. Okay. But this is like death and taxes. It's inevitable. This must go on. See where that takes me. Anyways, we're in where we are, as it said. And last time Jesus had made a very, what should we call it, provocative statement. The statement was provocative to the people he said it to. The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. You know, that was, this red light behind me is kind of freaky. It's just the sunrise. By the way, I prevented the dawning of the morning means I anticipated I was up before the dawn. And it's always cool when you get up before the sun does. Right? Alright, let's get into it. It's going to be the same subject, the Sabbath. Brain function coming online. Alright, Matthew 12:9. And when he was departed thence, he went into their synagogue. And behold, there was a man which had his hand withered. And they asked him, saying, Is it lawful to heal on Sabbath days? That they might accuse him. And he said unto them, What man shall there be among you that shall have one sheep, and if it fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, will he not lay hold on it and lift it out? Oh, you are Sabbath breakers. How much then is a man better than sheep? Wherefore, it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath day. Then saith he to the man, Stretch forth thine hand. And he stretched it forth, and it was restored whole, like as the other. He didn't even touch him. Huh? And the Pharisees went out and held counsel against him, how they might destroy him. And when Jesus knew it, he withdrew himself from thence, and great multitudes followed him, and he healed them all. Again, that's a hyperbolic statement. He healed all that he came into contact with. And charged them that they should not make him known. Don't tell any man, like he was saying to the man, the leper in the other chapter, where he said, you know, don't go telling people about it. Just go according to the law and go show yourself to the priest. That it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, Behold my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved, in whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him. He shall show forth judgment to the Gentiles. He shall not strive nor cry, neither shall any man hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed shall he not break, and smoking flax shall he not quench, till he send forth judgment unto victory. In his name shall the Gentiles trust. Okay. Verse 21. That completes that little section of text. That quote, by the way, is it Isaiah 40? 40 or 41? Oh, no, 42. 42. Let's see how good your memory works, Paul. Let's just check up on that, huh? Well, let's go to Isaiah 42. And you don't see this because the text I use up there is, I don't use this. Oh, boy. I don't know how to fix that. That's just annoying. Here we go. How about if I do it this way? That's almost like it. And it won't go to the right verse, though. That's 25, 42. Yeah. And you can see right away. Was Jesus changing the Old Testament? No, the Old Testament quoted in the New Testament was a translation from the Greek, translated back to English. So that accounts for the difference. Like instead of my beloved, it says mine elect. And while that, those are definitely different ideas. In every practical sense, they're the same thing. My elect, my beloved, my chosen, in whom I am well pleased. Because, do I have to explain that? I'm not going to explain it. The Septuagint was a translation from before the time of Jesus, when they translated the Old Testament Hebrew into Greek. And that's what accounts for why a lot of the Old Testament prophets, their names, like instead of Isaiah, it's Isaias. Instead of Elijah, it's Elias. Because that's how they translated the Greek. They transliterated those names, I should say. And then they transliterated from, if you transliterate from one language to another, and then to another language, you get a lot of, that loses some of the resolution on the terms and also on the translation itself. So the New Testament quotes are often a translation of a translation. At least in the King James. I don't know if other Bibles take that into account. I think they should stick with the form that was used. They consider that translation good enough to use. So, yeah. Let's just stick to the story of the man to begin with, and we'll talk about that Isaiah scripture. Verse 9. So they're laying this trap for him. It's despicable. I mean, he said he was Lord of the Sabbath day. And the idea of him doing miracles at the same time to testify to his authority means that, that is compelling. But the Pharisees were more interested in him honoring their interpretation, honoring their traditions. So this was actually a trap. They say he's doing healings and we'll catch him in some breach of the law. He said, but picking corn on the Sabbath. Now remember, I quoted that from the Old Testament, right? From Leviticus, when they went out to look for manna, and God said, why do you transgress? They say, oh, how awful. And the Old Testament God was so judgmental. Well, he didn't slay all those people. He just said, you're transgressing my covenant. He had mercy on them. There was no penalty. It was just, you're not listening to me. I said, no, there will be no manna. Follow these instructions. Get it ready the day before. But the whole thing about, like, each day just eat everything. It goes to, like, give us this day our daily bread, and then get to this part about it. When the manna came, it's like there was enough for each day. You know what I mean? There was no extra. If you tried artificially, you should just eat all that you had. If you tried to save some, which people did, like, let's hang on to this because we don't know if there'll be any tomorrow. That's human impulse. I'll eat half of what I got today in case tomorrow, because God knows God might abandon us at any time, and they were like that. And so they'd lace some up, as is very typical of people. Why do you think they sell those survival kits and the meal plans? And it's not entirely unwise, okay? But in this instance, God was trying to show them that they ought to rely on him at that particular time, if nothing else, but also to teach us the general lessons of how we ought to rely on God. But one might decide to save the food, but then it would go bad immediately after one day. The next day it bred worms and it stank. And so when he said then, well, on Sunday, on the Sabbath day, which is Saturday, you will, on Friday, you will take double, save up double, and then, and in fact, cook it, prepare it for Saturday, because Saturday is the Sabbath and you won't do any work. There will be no manna. I'm not going to provide manna on the Sabbath day, not because it's bad for me to do it, but because you're not supposed to be working on the Sabbath day. And so that is what happened. And you can, we discussed that last time. Now they're saying basically, he tells this story. He says he declares his lordship over the Sabbath. And I'm telling you, people to this day who are caught up in Sabbath keeping, I gotta say, of all the laws, it's the law that Jesus really took time to sort of say, like, this is much more flexible than you're accounting for. Though in the Old Testament it was not. The ironic part, and the Apostle Paul says, one man honors one day above another man honors every day alike. That's why I try to do this every day. Though this weekend I missed Sunday, I needed to catch up on sleep. That might happen this weekend too. I might take one of those days off to catch up. Otherwise I'll be a zombie all week, and I can't have that. But in any case, or maybe next week I'll be able to just go to bed early. That would be lovely. He said one man's honors every day alike. I mean, that's how flexible the Sabbath is. Let no man judge you in eating or drinking or in the Sabbath days. It says that in the New Testament. Jesus is like, we can pick corn on the Sabbath day. That wasn't legal before. It's definitely illegal. But I'm Lord, and I'm appointing these guys priests. That would be very offensive to establishment people, to people who are like, just like, I don't give myself, people give me titles and it's like, you're my pastor or whatever. I don't have a title. I just do what I do. I teach the Bible. So you could say he's a teacher. That's for sure, because he does teaching. That is acceptable. It's more like I'm a lecturer. I don't know how much of a teacher I am. But, there's things in the Bible I could compare it to, right? But if you called yourself an office, like if you say, I'm a pastor, or I'm a prophet, or if you declared some label on yourself that wasn't conveyed on you by agreement of some people who decided what they thought the criteria for that is. Like where they sat down and said, like, okay, we're going to start calling some people in our church prophets. And we're going to set up criteria. This is what a prophet is. Here's how you become a prophet, which is, this is not common inside evangelical circles or inside the world of traditional Christianity, but among Pentecostals, I've been in Pentecostal churches where they have a guy come who's a prophet who went to a school of prophets. And apparently it's that is identical with the idea of a cold psychic reading. Because that's what he did. He did cold readings. Which is, in my mind, I was astonished. It was like someone was doing witchcraft in the church. I mean, not precisely that, but it's more like a soothsayer than what I would consider to be a prophet. Prophecy is a form of like high-level teaching that doesn't involve it's not teaching so much as just speaking for God. I don't think God would come to me and say, "Hey, I see writing around you. What's that mean?" I mean, he didn't say, "What's that mean?" But he just said, "I see writing around you. I see this." A seer, a visionary. Yes, a prophet may be such. But what they see has to be what God shows them. And, I don't know. Gracious thoughts are coming into my mind because I'm older now. But at the time, I thought it was quite offensive. And certainly not something I would engage in. Cold reading. Okay, so... oh, gosh, I'm 20 minutes in? Really? I've been wasting that much time and I barely covered the text. Not that anything is wasted. Let's see. But just that they don't accept his authority. Jesus is set down, but I want to make it a good point, all right? Jesus and the Sabbath day. He talked about it enough so that it becomes like, and the New Testament talks about it enough. I mean, the fact that people still set down their, they still pitch their tent on the Sabbath day as far as that's an important commandment you've got to keep. It shows they don't really understand anything that happened in the New Testament, in my mind. They're reading stuff like this and they're saying, well, that doesn't mean, well, that, of course, that it doesn't indicate, there's all kinds of excusing and prevaricating that goes on, and it annoys me because there's so many more important issues going on. And Jesus was obviously very annoyed with them because he after declaring himself Lord of the Sabbath, he does this miracle right in their faces because he knew what they were thinking. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? They held the day above human misery. That's such a legalistic approach to God's law. And looking at the Old Testament, you would definitely think, well, maybe that is the approach. Except if you look at the whole Old Testament, you look at like Jesus does. He says, okay, yeah, you shouldn't pick food on the Sabbath day. So says Leviticus. And quite clearly in Leviticus, it was considered a transgression of the Sabbath to pick corn on the Sabbath day. But what about what David did? And God wasn't angry with him. Or what about the priests do continually? God rested on the Sabbath day. But it wasn't like the Sabbath day was Lord over him. He had to, it's the seventh day. I can't do any more work. He just did. And he blessed it. And and he's trying to get people in the law to do what's best for them. And getting them to take a day off to stop all their labor, to stop all this doing. There's deep wisdom in it. I don't hate the Sabbath day. God, I want one. I mean? The body needs to rest. But it's like I was saying about mental work and stuff. It's like I'm sitting here all day. Like yesterday, I sat in my chair for 14 hours. And I was working the whole time, barely moving. Today, I want to get up and go walk and maybe swing a hammer or something to move my body. It's rest for me. If I can only get out one day a week and do that, I try to do that every day. I try to take my rest on a daily basis. I mean, not just be all work and no play. But some men will just continue to work and work and work. They'll get enough sleep. But there's no end to their labors. And the Sabbath was said, put an end to your labors. You know, stop. Take a break. You know, as Jesus said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And God took us, you know, God rested. The Sabbath didn't come along and say, God, you must rest. I am Lord even of God. The Sabbath day is Lord. This is one of those things I also talk about. Like, there isn't like this arbitrary set of rules that God has to obey. He makes all the rules. It's not like it's like, well, I'd like to, but I can't because of the rules. There are these rules over God which he has to obey. There is no. Anything that God adheres to that has the form of a rule comes from him. It's a self-rule. And that's fine if he wants to say, like, I don't do healings on the Sabbath day. That's up to him. He can create any self-rule he wants. It's good to make self-rules. You know, that's discipline. That's self-discipline. That's highly desirable. But they are self-imposed, so they can also be lifted. Be lord of your self-rules. You can't be so hard on yourself that you what? I don't know how I got back there. That you have bad outcomes. I'm just going to not think it. Sorry. All right. So the man has a hand withered. I mean, there's a symbol. You know, what is it? This symbolizes. And think about it. Like, what do you do on the Sabbath day? Well, you work. Whatsoever you put your hand to do, do it with your might. The hand is symbolic of the labor performed by it. That's why the mark of the beast goes in the hand, because it symbolizes the work, and it goes on the forehead because on the forehead symbolizes the control of the mind. You know what I mean? The things that go on in the mind, the things that the hand does. When I received the Holy Spirit, it came on my lips, the organs of speech, my ears, the organs of hearing, my hands, the organs of labor, and my feet, the organs of moving about. It was a very symbolic experience for me when I received the Holy Spirit, and I immediately understood what all these symbols meant. You know, my hands would be swift to do new things, but it is the hands that perform these things. And having a withered hand, I mean, gosh, you know, do you ever play the game with yourself where you say, like, if I had to sacrifice a part of my body, you know, like if I had to lose. If I had to lose one organ, which would it be? I couldn't. I was like hand, foot, eyes, nose. You know, I thought about. I figured out what I would sacrifice. Let's just put it that way. But it was not my hands, my feet, my eyes, my ears, my nose, my mouth, my legs, my arms, or anything that I've mentioned, you know. But I figured out what I'd give up if I had to. And throughout history, many men have given that up. In a sense, it's like it is the most disposable thing. Let me check questions real quick, because this is train wreck today. Katie was right. I should have just waited an hour. So by the end of the study, my brain will be crackling. I'll be moving like wildfire, and then you had to sit through all this. All right. It wasn't that bad. I probably perceive it as worse than I do because I can't remember what I said 20 seconds ago, and that's troublesome. All right, promo card. I can't believe I'm halfway into this. Look at this. Line by line Bible studies. Subscribe. Click on the like button. You don't have to, but but I'm suggesting you do. oraclesofgod.org. Yes, studies, songs, more, visit, etc. And we have my other YouTube channel. That's all linked in the description below. And send your questions to questions@oraclesofgod.org. I will answer them Just like yesterday, there was someone who sent in a nice question for me to answer. And if you don't want to put it in the chat, I understand that, because chat sticks up there. Then every time it happens, there goes your question again. I don't know if you can delete those. You can delete a lot of comments on YouTube. Obviously, I've gotten into discussions with people where they subsequently deleted their comments, and it's just a bunch of my comments. You don't see the other person's saying. Anyways, so his power didn't say which hand is withered, but that's because the thing, I couldn't figure out my right hand or my left. My right hand, I need it so badly. My left hand, it's so important. Both are important, especially for me as a musician. I can't lose a hand. I can't even spare a finger. Maybe this one, I could spare my right pinky. But I swear, no, I use it for, it would be really weird without it. That'd be the most disposable, I guess, other than my other pinky. I mean, no, not my left pinky. I need every finger on this left hand. That is essential. And I thought about missing a foot. Though I suppose a toe, but to me that seemed like too small a price. What can you compare it to your hand? You know what I mean? To a whole hand. It'd have to be both feet or a whole leg or something down there to be even comparable. The hand is so essential. This man's hand was withered. You ever see people, they've got like, it didn't grow right, or I don't know. I don't know what it means by withered hand. I'm not going to look the word up because it's obvious. It's like shriveled. It has no strength. It's like all whatever. It's like, my hand, like one of those things where your hand is all really bad. In one way or the other. And they were tempting him. They brought him the man. That's such deep animosity is just unbelievable. It is, but it happens with people when you challenge established authority. There is a high likelihood of getting kind of an unreasoning resistance, unreasoning anger, unreasoning, meaning you might have a legitimate concern. This happens anytime someone says to me, not anytime, when someone says to you, or in any case, oh, if you ever see me doing anything wrong or some sin that I'm not aware of, please let me know, because and someone, there may be people, someone who is able to deal with the inevitable outcome of that. Meaning, like, I say that to you, and then you're like, hey, Paul, I noticed you were doing something. And I just go, tell me more. That is so difficult for people to do. They'll say things like, this happens to pastors, and I've known a few. They'll say to them, Pastor, if you ever notice anything with my behavior in my life or whatever, if you ever notice me being, not right or whatever, please tell me. And what they're really doing is signaling their own virtue. They're saying, I want to be, you know what I mean? It's like, it's more about, very frequently, not all the time, but very frequently it is an effort to impress the other person, because they don't think there's going to be anything that comes up. They don't think they have any flaws for the pastor to talk about. And every pastor I've ever talked to us about, they say, yeah, those people then, if you take them up on their offer, in your youth and your foolishness, you take them up on their offer, and you will be, I'm trying to think of the word I wanted. You will be, you'll regret it. Let's just put that out. There was an idiom I was searching for, like, when you touch the hot stove or something like that, whatever. You will get burned. You'll get burned doing that. They will not appreciate. Well, I thought you wanted to know what was wrong. But they don't appreciate. They don't feel so. And of course, if someone's critical of me, I know my first impulse is going to be to not listen, because it depends on what you're talking about, and if it's an area I'm aware of is a major problem for me. Like, people have been critical of me saying, Paul, you've got to be more interested. You got to think about other people more and be more of a thinking about people, how they feel, thinking about people, how they, how you're affecting them. Now, I've had people come to me with that since I was like 19 in the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. And even at that time, I knew it was true. I was like, yeah, I knew it. I already knew that was a problem. And I kind of laughed. I'm like, yeah, I realized that. I'm not a people person. I'll try to be. I want to try to work harder. And they were astounded at the time. I didn't think it was that astounding because I knew it was a problem. And sometimes if someone is they're oriented towards righteousness, and you bring up something they're aware of, they will be like, yeah, I know, I've been working on that for a long time. But then you bring up something to someone that they don't even realize they're doing, or they think is right, they're going to resist. When people think what they're doing is right, they resist any kind of rebuke. So they resist, the rebuke. I'm trying to bring it back to what this, because I feel like I'm riffing on this passage, but I'm like, I don't know. It all seems somehow, it's all interrelated. It's all right. This is an expository Bible study. I read the Bible and go on an exposition about what it makes me think about. I forgot what led me down that path, because it was just something worth talking about, because it is something that people are often something they often engage in. It's like, oh, tell me if you see any flaws. I want to be right. And if it's a flaw I'm aware of, I'm gonna gladly. Yeah, you're right. I'm that way. I'm not a people person. I really want to take more care after other people, and not be so like laser focused on things. It's a personality problem. I mean, because it's like it's just it might be part of your personality to be a. You're just maybe a very logical, facts and figures kind of person, and not so interested in like feelings and things like that. Even the way I said it, though I'm interested in feelings. It's just facts don't care about your feelings, and then if you're concerned with facts, it becomes difficult to care about feelings also. I always have pillows under my arms because of my shoulder condition, which is not a rotator cuff issue because I can raise my arms straight up, etc. All right, so, and Jesus says to them, before he said, "What do you remember what David did?" And now he says, "What man shall there be among you that shall have one sheep, and if it fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, will he not lay a hold on it and lift it out?" And if you have a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath day, you're going to be like, well, it's the Sabbath, I can't get it out. I guess it's just going to die. You know what I mean? You do things like that. And he says, well, isn't a man better? Therefore, he said it's lawful to do good. And when he heals this man's withered hand, he does not touch him. He just says, stretch out your hand. And I mean, is it lawful to stretch out your hand on the Sabbath day? And this point, he's putting a real fine point on this. Before he was claiming lordship, and now he's saying on the interpretive thing, they've gone off the rails. They're trying to entrap him by asking him to do something in front of them that is literally couldn't possibly be forbidden. To say, stretch out your hand, and then the power of God, because God, He does the healings, and Jesus even says so. My Father doeth the works. What Jesus is saying is when He healed people, the Father was doing the healing. That was said in another place. He doeth the works. I know that says it so. Okay. So the man stretches his hand is healed. Okay. Oh, and then they held counsel against him, how they might destroy him. That could mean literal, as in kill, as in destroy both soul and body in hell, but it could mean it metaphorically, like how they can. This may not refer to actually plotting his murder, so much as plotting his downfall. How can we, destroy this person? Because they do it. We have the politics of personal destruction. There's a lot of that going on right now, where they try to just destroy someone. Like they've got a reputation, and then they come in and then they try to destroy them with lies, with deceits, with whatever it takes, because preventing them from them spreading their interpretations of things like the law is more important than actual truth. The only thing that really matters in the end is the power. They want to, because Jesus' truth will undermine their power and their position. The Romans have granted them a certain amount of authority within their sphere. And one of their fears is that Jesus coming along and upsetting the order will cause the Romans to become upset and come and intervene and take away their place. You have not ruled the Jews well, so we're going to find someone else to rule over them. And that comes on them anyways afterwards, after he's gone. But not because of Jesus, because of the zealots. How did I get back here again? Okay, so the man stretches out his hand. They want to destroy him. He leaves after this, and they follow him. And multitudes followed him, and he healed them all. And all that he healed, he charges them not to make him known. Let me check the chat real quick for questions. Yeah, I don't know how there could be questions here. And then the scripture from Isaiah, behold my servant whom my beloved, of mine elect in the Hebrew, in whom my soul is well pleased. And the reason I think there's really no difference between beloved and elect is because, though on the surface there are different things, when Paul talks about God's elect, one of the things he says is, I am persuaded that nothing can separate us from the love of God. To be God's elect is to be his loved. To be loved is to be chosen. You know what I mean? It's like if God puts his love on you, then you are his elect. That's why the idea of election and love render the idea, I say God does not love everybody, because love is very closely associated with the idea of election. And election means selection. It means a discriminatory process of choosing, which God engages in to choose some for life and others for destruction. To choose some for grace and mercy and some for judgment, for wrath. And so, the idea of love cannot be divorced from the idea of election. And even it's encoded here in the scriptures, in the translation of the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament. They say beloved. The Old Testament says elect, mine elect. My wife is my elect. She's the one I chose. I mean, she was chosen for me by God, but I also myself consented to this choice, and thereby I chose her. There were other women around in my world, and I wanted to find a wife, so I chose that one. One of the best choices I've ever made. But there you go. It is a choice. And some people say love is a choice. That's true. Love is a choice. Yes, there's passion. Passion often is not voluntary. But it is also, I mean, when you actually engage in it, it is a form of choice, of choosing, of election. How can you talk about things like predestination and that at the same time? Because I am not God. For God, everything is elected. But in that election, I mean, we are choosing what comes natural to us. It could be different if God put someone else in my position. Like if the sperm that became my egg got sidetracked and something else happened, there'd be another person living another life and being very different from me. Or very similar, I have 8 children, and they're very different from each other. But then, if you have enough children, you start seeing bits of patterns. There are some that get pretty close to each other as far as their appearance and personality and skills. They can be more or less close in that because of the genetic diversity of 2 humans. It's enough to make millions of individual people. But the number of children, though, as far as at least if you throw out the idea of twins, it is limited between my wife and I. Like, we could only produce so many variances of the genetics. I wonder if there's ever been a case, and it's certainly possible. You could have separately conceived twins, meaning an identical sperm gets to an identical egg, because the way those things are, the way they are generated is somewhat random. It's the possibility of rolling the same thing, though obviously that's highly improbable. I'm not going to get off on that. That's saying weird stuff now. Okay, so love and election, whom I have chosen, my beloved, in whom my soul is well pleased. Boy. So part of this thing about Jesus, when Jesus tells people, don't talk about it. Part of it is to fulfill the scriptures. He shall not strive nor cry, neither shall any man hear his voice in the streets. It's not to say that he is not speaking in public, but what it means is he is not making a show of himself. It's like, whatever. I take a similar attitude about the things I do. Like those low number of viewers that this stream gets is partially due to the fact that I don't promote it actively. I put up a link up on my website. I announced it once or twice on the Line by Line Bible Studies group on Facebook. But certainly I could do a lot more to try to get people to notice it. And I may yet, because, I don't want you to have to watch the inside of my mouth. I may yet do more. I don't think it's forbidden. At some point, Jesus does make his triumphant entry into Jerusalem. At some point, things change. In the book of Revelation, chapter 19, he comes in righteousness, he doth judge and make war. He is meek and lowly and riding on an ass, But then in Revelation, when he returns, he is on a white horse, a symbol of, the illustrious and glorious leader, riding on the white horse, the king who conquers, the King of kings, the Lord of lords. He comes in that manner too. There's a Zechariah 9:9, Zechariah 9:10 are a good example of the dual nature of prophecy often, because he is at the same time meek and lowly and also a conqueror. And having, to be able to sort that out, it's like the one who is meek and lowly, the one who is humble, is also the ideal leader and conqueror. He is the one that needs to win the battles. He is the one who needs to rule over all. The humblest of all needs to be the most glorified. And humble meaning because humility is like a relative thing. It's not just that someone who is, let's say, retarded humble as a child because they're retarded to the state of childishness. They are humble, but they are not as humble as someone who is brilliant and yet humbles himself as a child. The degree to which they lower themselves is so great. The difference between their humility and their ability is how you measure that. That's why Jesus was the most humble of all, even though at times he says, I am he. I am Lord of the Sabbath. That was a very humble way of him to say, yeah, I'm God. I can make the rules up myself. Thank you. I'm not come to destroy the law. I've come to fulfill it. I'm going to fill in all the blanks. You know what I mean? I'm going to rewrite it for you so it makes more sense. So you can make more sense of it. The law is quite clear, but there is a spirit in the law which men are, even with the scripture, like I said, like I often say, that there is a spirit that, I just feel the sun on me once again, and I love it. There's a spirit in the law which is, and in the scripture, like, if you confess with your lips the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God raised from the dead, you'll be saved. Well, let's take that in a literal way. We'll take that as a letter of the law. We'll interpret that legalistically. So if you say that and you believe it, that's all you have. That at that point you're saved, and you can't lose your salvation. Though I don't believe you do lose salvation, because salvation is truly wrought in God. But you can't be deceiving yourself. If someone goes on to turn their back on Christ, you're going to say they're still saved. And I have people who will say that. I've seen them where they say, they grew up, they received Christ, and then as adults, they turn their back on him and become atheists. And there are people in Christianity who will say they're still saved. No, I say they never were. If you end up in the lake of fire on Judgment Day, that's not you didn't lose your salvation. You were never saved, because that's the moment you need to be saved in. You know what I mean? Salvation is salvation when it counts. You know what I mean? It's the important point. It's like being saved while you're going to the grocery store, and using the toilet, and working in the garden, and swinging the hammer, and smiting the anvil. Being saved at those moments is not very important. It doesn't mean anything. Being saved is from death, is from the lake of fire. That's the only time salvation has any meaning. You have to be under threat to be saved from something. I'm saved walking around. That's a transitive verb. It's got. I just exist as saved. I'm saved from what? Though it is intransitive, I guess. I'm saved. Though there's an implied something you're saved from. I guess you can be saved. But if you put it in the past tense like that, there has to be something that, the airplane crashed and I was saved. I'm not sure about the transitive or intransitive nature of that. Maybe someone who is better at English technicalities could tell me. It doesn't really matter. The point is that salvation is not a legalistic thing any more than Jesus is saying the Sabbath, all these laws. There's a spirit that goes deeper. There's a deeper rest. Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath day? Is it lawful to sit around worrying on the Sabbath day about the work you have to do on Monday or a Sunday, whatever? Is it lawful to sit around calculating your mind evil? To prepare violence against someone for doing a good deed, as they were? That's his argument, that it's the lawfulness of it. And so, I don't want to go back to that. He shall send forth judgment to victory. It says unto truth in the Old Testament. I know this because I've memorized. I have not exactly a song, but I have a piece of music over which this is spoken on my second album, which never got finished exactly. As far as it was recorded, it was written, but it never got the treatment my first album got, because the band broke up, basically. There never was a band. There was just me and Brian. So, he shall bring forth judgment unto truth, unto victory, as it says here. That's interesting, because it also says, like in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, it says, death is swallowed up in victory. But in the Old Testament, death is swallowed up forever. But you know what? There's an interesting... I'm writing that down, honestly. Because I find it fascinating. I mean, I'm not kidding. I'm like, I gotta write this down, because it just struck me as such an interesting idea. And it has to do with the study I'm working on. Oh, where do I write the note down? Okay. I want to put it on the right piece of paper. Alright, well, I'm just going to write it down. Victory. Victory, truth, and forever. Just that those three words, like how closely related they ultimately are. Because that which is true, it makes me think of, the idea of true has to do with an arrow, with hitting the mark. Well, actually, the idea of sin has to do with missing the mark. So that which is not hitting the mark. And when we shoot an arrow, we say it flies true. Straight. And also in hitting the mark, there is sort of a victory. Like I hit a bullseye. I win. The arrow flew true. But I always remember in mathematics and science, when we would draw these rays, it was a straight line and a little arrow. And they go out forever. That which is straight, that which is narrow, that which is not deviating, goes on forever. That which is true. Truth is what allows us to live forever. Life, life is, if we have that which is true, we can live. If we go astray, we die. How many times in our experiences that is that not correct? If we don't do things right, if we don't orient ourselves properly in the world, we will go astray, and our lives will come to an early end. We don't always know what the truth is. We don't always know what the straight path is in any given situation. I mean, like I said, that's part about the liberty of being in Christ, is like that the law wasn't written for every situation you will ever encounter. That's why you have to, the question in your mind when you approach a given situation where you have to make a moral choice is not, well, what's the law say? You've got to know the law and the spirit in which it was written and the intention behind it. And when you know all that information, you can make, in your liberty, you can make a decision about a new situation, and it can be the truth of this is how one ought to respond to this situation. He sends forth judgment to victory. Judgment, which brings about truth, true judgment, victorious judgment. Judgment. And it's not just, don't always think about judgment as the judge sitting up there judging things. It's about you judging things. About you having the judgments. It's like, well, like in the days of Moses, what do we do? They were always going to Moses and saying, my friend Mark Nutting always used to use this, he called it the Moses syndrome. It's like in churches, they want to go to the pastor and say, Pastor, what do we do? And I say, well, here's the situation, blah, 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 blah. What should I do? I get emails like that. God, I'm behind an email. Oh, Lord. Very soon. What do we do? What do we do? We want to go to the leader and say, what do we do? Tell us what to do and we'll do it. That's what Jesus does. He sends forth judgment that gives us, that's what we do. And then when we do what he says, when we follow his dictates, we are victorious. They are true. If the arrow flies true, you will win. You know what I mean? If we make the right decision, then we will continue. It's what verse is it? 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and I don't remember the verse, but it says death is swallowed up in victory. And if you look in the Old Testament, it's death is swallowed up forever. And that's another Septuagint thing. But I think it's fascinating. Because there was probably some, like I said, in the interim, multiple ideas come out of this idea of, they use victory, truth. Victory ties both truth in English. I mean, the English word victory is used to translate things that are in the Old Testament translated truth and forever. And that's because of the Greek. But it's fascinating how related those terms all are. And I skipped right over the first part of that verse, didn't I? His voice in the streets. A bruised reed shall he not break, smoking flax shall he not quench. This is an important idea. And the rest of this, let's see if I can cover it. I got time. My eyes are all dried out. And like I said, I didn't get up quite early enough, and I do not feel like I'm buzzing along. But we'll make it. Let's have a drink of water. I should probably mute it for that, right? So you don't have to hear my swallowing noises. The idea of the bruised reed shall he not break, the smoking flax shall he not quench. It's an analogy of snuffing out that which is barely hanging on. If something is wounded, a bruised reed, it's already got damage. So easy to just break. And smoking flax, it's about to go out. Jesus restores the hope of the hopeless, those whose hopes are fading. And this is something faith can do for us when we put our faith in him. He is over and over again for so many people. He is not just our Savior at the lake of fire, but he saves us in many circumstances in our life. Maybe not the grocery store and the things like I said. It's like that's not when it's important. But when your life's embers are burning low and you feel like you're at the end of what you can endure, the Lord is what keeps our lives, our hearts, our spirits burning. Or he at least is not there to snuff it out, but brings forth the judgment, so that the flames and the fires can burn again. I've had many times where I come to low ebbs, man, where my flax is smoking and the flame is guttering. Is that the right word? Guttering flame? I believe so. Can't think of a replacement. You see that when the flame is dying, or at least you feel that way. I mean, God knows I've never really experienced. Sorry, I'm rubbing my hands right. God knows I've never really suffered. I've suffered in my way. It felt like suffering. But I compare my suffering to the suffering of others, and I think, that's not suffering. That's not trial. That's not anything like those things. It's like I said, it's like, to a man with two hands, losing one is a sore trial. But a man born with one, lives that trial every day. And it is somewhat diminished by his relative position of being used to that. And it's not devastating. It's like, well, I've lived like this every day of my life. I mean, he wants his hand made whole. His withered hand, the man with the withered hand. Sure, he wants his hand made whole. But that does not mean that his life is destroyed because of it. He finds a way, but then a man who has two whole hands, if he loses one, he'll be devastated by it. And I've certainly, in my way, been devastated by things that, like they say, talk about first world problems, right? Things that people in other parts of the world would not even think were first world problems. I mean, or whatever. But the thing is, though, relatively speaking, it is significant to the human mind because you get this expectation of things being a certain way. So you do suffer, at least mentally. I'm like shaking the whole table. Some first world problems are silly and should be taken in perspective. And I got to put perspective on this and what people are suffering in other parts of the world. But still, like I said, it's like, what should we... Because some people have withered hands, should those who lose their hands receive no sympathy? Since other people can't, have no use of their legs or are paralyzed, if someone who used to walk becomes paralyzed, should it be like, well, now you see what it's like? Snuff out their lives, snuff out their only hopes, or their, what they have left that is keeping them holding on. We should be careful the way we talk to people. One of my takeaways from that is that, we don't want to be like someone who's just barely hanging on, to be the ones to come along and say something awful to them that causes them to despair of life. As Christians, we want to bring forth victory truth. true judgment. So, we're 5 minutes over. I'll probably do a little recap on this when we start tomorrow because, etc. I've made it. Sorry about this. Like I said, I did not get the sleep I should have last night. My eyes are dry. I probably need a nap today. But anyways, this is the card. Let's see if there's any. I'll take one last look at the questions. Thank you. No questions. All right. I don't want to make boring. I don't think it was boring. Was it? Okay, there's line by line Bible study, subscribe, etc. This part is getting boring. Let's wrap it up. All right, thanks for joining me today. I look forward to studying with you again tomorrow on a good night's sleep. And bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, I guess. Anyways, here we go. And I chose this for this, well, I almost thought about using this song for my whole Bible study, except it just, I don't know. I like to mix it up.
I cried with my whole heart, hear me. O Lord, I will keep thy statutes. I cried unto thee, save me, and I shall keep thy testimonies. I prevented the dawning of the morning. I cried, I hoped in thy